The following podcast is being brought to you by the Defy Life Podcast Network.
Welcome to Aftergate, powered by the Defy Life Network. Aftergate is a podcast series highlighting Colgate alumni of color in their professional endeavors Aftergate. Aftergate is hosted by Alvin Glimpf, aka Al, and Herman Dubois, aka Jerry. We are doing Aftergate because Colgate University has produced innovators who have changed the world every day, yet many alumni of color and the mainstream Colgate community are unaware of the amazing accomplishments of alums of color.
Welcome to Aftergate, where we are here and our whole mission is just having really good conversations with alumni of color, hearing what their stories were like when they were on campus, and also just digging into who they have become and what's their journey been like. So it has been awesome. We really have had some amazing people come through Aftergate, and we have another one on deck, ladies and gentlemen. But first, as always, let me check in with my brother from another mother.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Dubois, how you doing?
All is well, my brother, all is well. I keep telling folks, I'm just happy to be alive and free. You know, these days you can't even take that for granted. So alive and free, healthy, living down here in Miami, can't really complain about that. We kind of escaped hurricane season so far, it looks like the case. So that's always in the words of a wise man, that was a good day. You know what I'm saying?
That was a good day in the words of Ice Cube.
Man.
And we get to spend some time every week or so on one of our passion projects.
Yes,
Gonna
sir.
keep throwing that out there. Shout out to
Yes, sir.
Kendra for bringing that term to us. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm good, man. Newest thing in my life is my daughter bought a car.
Oh, she is balling
She is part
right
of
now.
the adulting.
She's
crew.
officially registered. It's called Car Note.
Car Note
membership. Right.
Sends me a text and says, "Yeah, Dad, this thing is
So what you
overrated."
get? The paying or the driver?
Adulting is overrated.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a lot harder than it looks. She got a Kia K5.
Okay.
2021 Wolf Gray. Looks hot as hell.
Nice. Good for her. She's what, 22?
22, you know.
So I'm trying to think and this is her first car that she buys on her own, right?
I bought her the other one.
Right. For her independent, right? Independent.
Right.
You done good, Big Papa. You done good. Because you and I at 22 was not doing that.
But what I did do, and she is the chip from the old block, is as soon as I got my first job and my first check, that was one of my first purchases. So she definitely
followed the footsteps.
I got a 94 Acura Integra coming out of
graduate
school, Georgia State University.
I remember that. Gray.
Green.
Oh, green. That's right. Green. Yes, green coupe.
Yes.
Yeah, the coupe. Yeah.
Remember that stick shift, right?
I was like, whoa.
She's like her daddy like that. But
good for her. Good for her,
right? I'm happy for her.
Absolutely.
Colgate question of this week is, if you had to give credit to Colgate for one thing besides your education, besides your degree, what would you give them credit for? And mine is easy. Mine is the meeting of my wife and the fact that I met my girlfriend, my love of my life, lover for it is easy box to check. Your turn. What you got?
Wow. So my struggle is trying to determine which one do I share, because they all have their own special place. And you said aside from my education, so I'm gonna classify that aside from my formal education, meaning my required education that Colgate required to complete to get a bachelor's degree. But I've oftentimes said that some of my greatest growth as an individual and as a human being came from my education outside the classroom. And I think it was truly a renaissance awakening period for me, that even at the time going through it, that I knew it was changing everything about my orientation and how my outlook on life. It's really now looking back to see how much of a pivot that was, how much it influenced so many elements of my life, professionally, personally, but the awakening of understanding my history and my identity, and what I would never really taught formally in school, like in your family, there's some dialogue, but that generational sort of process of not really knowing the roots of who you are, and sort of that whole experience with Dr. Tedler, the Sankofa way, being educated about what sort of unfortunate oppression and the setbacks of history that really took its toll on the advancement of all of our people. And so I think that has been the number one takeaway, because it's redirected my whole life. It's the reason why I do what I do professionally. It's the way my political views are shaped. It's how I govern my spirituality. And I would have never seen that coming. That would have never been on no Colgate literature.
You ready?
Let's go. I'm excited. Come on.
So, After Gate listeners, tonight we have a gentleman that we go back to 1987, the summer of 1987, where
Sounds
Jerry
like
and I, hey, I'm a storyteller, where Jerry and I actually met. And this is where we met this gentleman as well, because he was our RA during our OUS, that time called the Scholars Program.
Yes, sir.
It was a Scholars Program.
Did we have anything to do with the name change?
Yes, we did. Facts. Check that.
Okay. All right.
Because it was that
we'll
summer
come back to that.
where the incident happened with the frats.
Several incidents happened that summer.
Okay. As well as,
yeah.
I mean, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. But if you remember correctly, both of y'all, we acted a damn fool that summer.
Oh, that's why I asked immediately.
We acted a damn fool that summer, and just credit to this man as our RA who tried to guide us, tried to shield us, tried to tame us, tried to educate, coach us, but we still acted so crazy, including what happened in those frats that night.
Yeah.
OUS name change, branding purposes.
Yeah.
And the students no longer stayed off of Main
off
Street
campus.
like
Off campus. Yeah. They were like
next year,
lesson learned.
Next year they brought him on campus. So we changed a lot that summer, and he was there.
And it's not something we should actually be highlighting as a tribute, but
no, not at all. I'm just painting. We know how we paint the context, take it back, and just
But what I was going to get at was, I have a much more a greater level of respect personally and professionally, because it was his job, right? It was his job to be in a role of leadership as an upperclassman, and they set him up. You know what I'm saying? Because he had no idea what was coming his way. In all fairness, he did what he could, but I'm sure. Because I've been now as a professional and I work in education, and I've been on the other side. I could see what if I come to him like, "Yo, what is going on?" He's like, "You don't understand, Mr. Like, I'm doing everything I can," but he said,
everything y'all taught me.
This is like baby's kids goes to college.
Right. Like now think about this. And I'm about to say his name and bring him in the room. But think about this. It just crossed my mind. Any group of 40 students of color that has me and you on the roster alone,
right there's a problem.
You deserve combat pay to be that RA.
Right.
Let alone some of the other folks who was on that roster, but just me and you. So to have us in the room, we I would be ready to choke us. To be honest.
Right, yo.
Okay, enough of ours.
Straight disrespect.
Let's bring in Mr. Darien McFadden.
Yeah. What up, D?
I have to tell you, I think I blocked out the fraternity incident that summer. I remember everything else.
So check this out. I'm gonna tell you what happened. We coined this in the last call. You are, we might need you to testify. We're going to do a civil, a class action suit on post Colgate traumatic disorder that we all got ground. Check
Some way
this
or
out.
another.
If there's not going to be some kind of reparations, yo,
Right.
how about just complete loan forgiveness? How about just that?
Right.
And we'll call it even.
We'll
And
call
I'll
it
be
even.
like, I'm still healing, going to therapy, but don't worry about it. It's okay.
They at least owe us that.
They at
What?
least-
Yo, I think we
But-
got a case.
My other fond memory of you is when we were up on that scholars program, occasionally we would go downtown, hang out in whatever that bar was, Dark
The
Horse,
Hourglass.
the Hourglass,
Yeah.
and dance to some
Yeah.
hip hop, but not really, because white people was listening to it, but it was Run DMC, so I was cool with it. Grandmaster Flash, I'm cool with it.
Yes.
So it was a little bit of club and nightlife that I could get up in Hamilton, New York.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who else was there, but it was a crew of us, like
Yeah.
6, 7, 8 of us that would walk downtown, get our little dance on, and come back. So
that was a thing. We did that. I remember our freshman year. I think we did that my scholar summer. You know, the same crew, Maxine and Winsome wasn't much for dancing, but she'd go, and Jennifer and Holly and a whole bunch of us. Keith, who wasn't around by the time you started. He had transferred. But
Okay.
we would go down and dance during the summer. And when we came back to campus as freshmen that fall, the sophomores, the Black kids from the sophomore class that had been in the University Scholars Program, were doing the same thing. So that was like our place. We would always go down there and like dance amongst the white people.
Okay, remember that. That was a fond memory. I enjoyed that.
I can say that I don't have any recollections of that because remember, I would be going to Utica on the weekend
Yes.
to see my high school sweetheart. And so
I knew you left town.
always 12B. I knew that 12B route like the back of my hand.
I knew you
see
were
his
uptown.
young lady.
350, 370. Oh no, 1275. I think was the bus from Student Union to downtown
Utica.
bus depot in Utica, and then I would catch a taxi to campus.
I remember. Yeah.
In
But it's
love, in love,
crazy
in
shit
love.
love got you doing. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Second story. So I had initially been arranged to live in HRC. Because of our bond and whatever you saw in me, you say, you know what? I want him. You pull a power move and said,
Oh wow.
take that glimpse guy out of HRC, put him in my dorm.
Did I
Put him
do
in
that?
you did that. And like when I find out, I'm like, I think I was just kind of like, yo, what the hell happened? And you was like, nah, I did that. Trust me. This will be better for
Look,
you.
another thing he
Did
blocked
you have
out
a
of his
bad
mind.
experience?
No. I'm thanking you. This is also, I'm thankful for that because it gave me a different look on the campus than a whole lot of my friends and people that, so I'm glad. And I got to hang out in HRC plenty of times. So I'm not.
And you know what? Now that you say that, I can remember what I was thinking because that's what happened to me my freshman year. Most of my friends from the Scholars Program were in Harlem Renaissance, and I was in Dodge, second floor Dodge. And initially I was really upset, but it actually ended up being the best experience for me because at the time, and maybe you can attest to this yourself, but at the time, if you lived in KED during those years when KED was present, you knew everybody in your class because that was kind of the place that lots of first year students came through, whether they lived there or not.
Freshman projects.
Yeah, it was like projects.
Hey, I can definitely attest to it to the point that honestly, and Jerry has made the comment to me when we've gone back to reunion.
Yeah.
And he notices the
difference
number
in the
of white
engagement.
folk that I am engaging and know and remember.
Yeah.
And him and others. And he's like, yo, what the hell? And I'm like,
and they're always like,
KD.
And they're always like, ow. Oh, and your sidekick. Because that's the only way, like, they remember. Because I never interacted. If you was in my class, I ignored you. You know?
So
literally, I remember, I think it was Holly, whose name is now Sister.
Yes.
But I think I remember her saying to me at one point during one year, probably junior year, why you know so many white people? And I was like, I think it's KD. You know,
definitely
that's
KD.
It's just what happened. So.
Third story and final story.
Uh-oh.
Homecoming weekend, Alvin Glimpf gets probably the drunkest he ever was on Colgate's campus, but definitely as the drunkest I had ever been in my life at that point.
What year was this?
Homecoming weekend, my freshman
year. Okay.
September. So I'm not even on campus a month.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's homecoming, and I don't really know. I'm like, so what's the big deal? My RA comes, snatches me up, and is like, yo, come on, let's hang out. And I'm like, He's like, I know a couple of parties down in the apartments. I don't know how to drink yet, so I'm hanging with folk. They giving me this bourbon, drinking. I'm drinking gin.
Chugging it.
Vodka, bang. Oh, you got beer? I'll drink that too. Yo, by the time I get back, I don't know who's with us, but I'm yelling out the window, out the sunroof. He has to carry me up to the dorm.
Wow.
And it's like, yo, stay here tonight in your room.
I remember that. I
pass out on the floor.
You were on the couch.
Okay, maybe I started on the couch.
Because I had an apartment.
Yeah, I remember seeing those apartments. I was like, whoa. Make you want to be at HR.
I was thrown. I was. Woo-hoo.
Wow. I remember that. You're taking me back.
You took good care of me is my whole point.
Hey, that's real. That's real. My brother's keeper.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I totally forgot the fraternity incident. Sigma Chi, right?
Yes.
I can't remember which one it was, but I know it was a frat.
Oh, I remember.
The one on campus near the cultural center.
Yes. But I blocked that out until the two of you just mentioned that, and then all of a sudden it came rushing back.
Right, all of it.
And I remember it. And wow.
I might want to get your perspective on being an RA over something to that magnitude.
Yeah, I would be happy. I have thoughts. I remember so RAing at Colgate was my life. Like seriously.
You were a 4-year RA, right? Did you do 3 years?
Well, not so I did the only summer I didn't do was the summer after freshman year. So I was an RA the summer before junior year, my junior year during the school year, summer before senior year, and then
senior year
resident in KED senior year.
So when you saying RA for that same program, when you over the summer did scholars program as well? I was
an RA for during the summer. It was for the scholars program.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, and during the school year, it was just in the residence halls.
And you say it was your life. You were damn good at it.
Well, I appreciate that, but so I knew I wanted to go into the field that I'm in now.
Okay.
Counseling psychology, since I was, I think, probably, I think 6th grade, around that time, and it's not the kind of field that you can get really experience in without a degree, at least a master's degree, and that's still essentially the case all these years later, where you can't really get practice as a psychotherapist or counselor or psychologist until you have some level of training. So the closest thing for me, I thought, was to be in res life and to be able to work with other students. And I loved. I was so grateful for the scholars program when I was the summer before my freshman year. My class, if y'all remember, the 88 folks, we were very tight. We had our little group, and that was because of our summer, and that meant the world to me. And so that's why I wanted to do it during the summer. And during the school year, it was important to me to do because I wanted some experience, or my imagined experience, in the realm of counseling. So, but I remember distinctly after this incident happened, I thought I was going to lose my job.
Possible explosion. That you had when you had graduate, you were going into your senior year, right?
No, I was going into my senior year. Yeah.
So you could have potentially faced J board or something like that.
No, it wouldn't have been.
I'm messing with you.
And I was on J board actually.
Of course.
That would have been interesting. But no, But I feared, by that point I knew I was going to be a head resident in KED already, and I feared that I would have lost that and my position over the summer, which like on an integrity basis, I'd never at that point lost a job.
You were a veteran. You were a veteran at that point.
I was a veteran during that. The only job I lost to that point was my orientation week freshman year.
Okay.
Myself, Maxine Reed, and Winsome Rudd were supposed to work. Yes, you remember Winsome. We were supposed to work in the dining hall as our work study, and they were having a big picnic or something for the first years, and someone told us to go sit down, and so we sat down and lost our jobs.
Oh, y'all like sitting.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, then go sit back in your dorm room.
Exactly. But I was grateful because I ended up working in the Dana Art Gallery for a while.
Even better.
Which is better because I
absolutely.
So okay.
Yeah, y'all are taking me back.
Hey, we just started, bro.
Hey, it was just yesterday. That's I'm telling you, post Colgate traumatic disorder stays with you.
So whenever we get guests that I've met before, I always like to go into the Glymph encyclopedia and think, what are some of the stories? What do I remember this guy? So besides KED, OUS Scholars Program RA, you were my RA at KED, right?
Oh, really?
But, yes, because I was in KED. Now he was in he wasn't in my particular dorm.
I was in Dodge.
He was in Dodge. I was in Kendrick.
In Dodge at the time.
So let's go back.
We haven't even started the show yet.
But I want you to take us back in your own words and your memory. What's life like? You are from Queens, if I remember correctly.
Queens, New York, South Ozone Park, right? Like literally, I used to be able to look out my parents' bedroom window and see the hotels around Kennedy Airport.
Yes, something we had in common. I'm from Queens, from Rosedale.
Yes.
What's life like for you then in high school? What kind of attracted you to Colgate? Give us that story.
Yeah, so I went to 12 years of Catholic school. It was I think that the story that I have been given from my parents at the time, who have since passed, was that I know they moved up they were part of that great migration up to the north from the south. They were living in Charleston until the 50s, the mid 50s, I think, and moved up from there to the Bronx with my 3 older sisters. And then when they moved to the Bronx, the sister before me was born when they were in the Bronx. And my mother put all of my sisters in Catholic school, like Catholic all girls schools, and my parents were Baptist at the time, because my mother's father was a Baptist minister, I believe, long dead before I was born, but put them into Catholic schools because whatever the situation they perceived the situation to be in schools in New York during the 50s for Black people. Mm-hmm. So when they moved out to Queens and had me, I came along. There was no question. You were going to Catholic. So I went to Catholic elementary school for 8 years and went right into Catholic high school in Queens, St. Francis Prep out in Fresh Meadows. Mm-hmm. And actually hadn't wanted to go to Colgate. At the time, I thought I wanted to go to Notre Dame.
Another
Catholic university, yeah.
So it was just in my head that that's what I was going to do. And I remember I'd never visited Colgate. I applied because I had they sort of solicited me, the way colleges used to do when you took the PSATs or the SATs, and you get information about a school if you signed up for one of that information. And I got literature, and I ended up applying because I knew I wanted to major in psychology, and so they had a psych major, and the campus looked pretty. I thought, all right, I'll apply. What the heck? Can't hurt. But I wanted to go to Notre Dame, and I got waitlisted at Notre Dame and was heartbroken And my brother-in-law at the time had been a football coach for Columbia. And he said, and I'd already gotten into Colgate like a week or so before, and had just kind of been waiting for Notre Dame. And he said, you should consider Colgate. It's like a little Ivy, which was the idea at the time. And I thought, okay, that sounds good to me. So and they gave me a good scholarship, and you know, I said I'll go to Colgate. And I figured if I didn't like it, I could just transfer, you know, after a first year. A week later, what's that?
Transfer to Notre Dame.
That's what I thought if I could get in. A week later, I got into Notre Dame.
Oh wow!
But they did not offer me a decent financial aid package, so I thought, all right, I'll go to Colgate. I'll see how I like it. And my plan really was going to be to transfer after freshman year. And I remember my parents driving me up for the scholars program that summer and passing all the farms and the cows. And I thought, what am I doing? What am I doing? And honestly, I can say to you, by about a week into the program, I never looked back. There was never a desire after that the idea of transferring to Notre Dame disappeared.
Why?
Well, the easiest thing to say would be that I loved the surroundings. Not as an adult, I wouldn't have wanted to live there as an adult, but from the ages of 18 to 21, it felt like a good spot to be in. But the reason really was our class. We were very connected. The Black people in my class that summer who were in, and I don't want to say the Black people because not all the Black people in our classes were part of the Scholars Program. But the folks that were in the program with me that summer were, we just enjoyed each other so much and had such a good time. So much so that when I came back in September, I felt like I was going back to a school that I had already been a student at.
Wow.
And I remember all the guys on my floor, because at the time, Dodge was single sex by floor. So I was on an all men's floor at the time. And all the guys on my floor could not understand why I knew so many Black women and why they were always coming up to my room to get me on Fridays and Saturdays to go down to the Hourglass to dance.
Right.
It was just, it felt like where I was supposed to be. So I loved it.
Tell me a little bit of what life is like for you on campus. So you get up there, you had an amazing summer. What's your experience like on campus?
So I think at some point early on, I realized that I was the only Black student in all of KED my freshman year. So
like 300 students. It was like
I think it was, if I remember the number, for some reason, Al, I want to say 178.
Okay. 180.
I think
students.
there were 178 students between the three buildings.
Okay.
And I am 99.9% sure that I was the only Black student in that entire that entire block of buildings. So that was interesting to me, right? It was not my neighborhood growing up was I wouldn't even want to say predominantly, it was an all, I don't want to say African-American because we had Caribbean-American folks in my community as well, but it was a Black neighborhood.
Yep.
My elementary school was a Black elementary school. My high school was mixed. Like if you know the Italian community in New York, there's a big mixture. If you think about Queens at the time, lots of Italian folks, lots of a decent size population of Black and Latinx students, but mostly white people. So our percentages at the time, students of color, I would say in high school were probably like 7 to 10% of the school.
Wow.
Probably. It was small.
Yeah.
But it was a similar situation where we had a Black table, and the Black people sort of stuck together and formed a bit of a community within a larger white community. So I wasn't unfamiliar with it, but I don't think I fully expected it. And it was a pretty fascinating first year. literally had guys on my floor that had never seen a Black person in real life before. Literally, there were guys from the Midwest.
Yep.
Who their only familiarity with Black people was stuff that they saw on TV, like the Jeffersons or, you know, Good Times or whatever. If you think about stuff that was accessible at the time, 1984.
It was that way in 1987.
Right.
It was still that way when there were freshmen who would be like, you know, you are like the first Black person I've ever really spoken to in my life, right?
Yeah. But that was like, I don't know what your experience of that was, but for me, I was like, really? Because even if you grow up in New York like, I think about white people that I went to school with, even if they grew up in white neighborhoods, New York was New York. And so you couldn't really go too far.
It's not Wyoming.
Oh,
right. You could not go too far. Right, Jared. You couldn't go too far without seeing someone that looked different from you.
Seeing and experiencing. I moved into Rosedale. We were the 4th Black family on our street.
Are you
serious?
So,
yes. So there were plenty of white people as a kid that I grew up around. I went to school with some. So while to your point of how did I react, while it seemed strange, like, wow, that's so different from how I grew up, but it never offended me or anything like that. It was just more of a, like, all right, well, you met one now.
Yes. And I do remember it didn't offend me either. I remember my mother said to me when I was young, and maybe it was around the time that I was first going to high school because there were more white people there. I remember her saying to me, if you can educate one person about your experience, that's really changing the world. Because the idea was that person will have different information and then will be able to impart that to other people throughout their lives. So the guys on my floor would ask me the dumbest questions, like, why is the skin on your knees darker than the rest of your body or your elbows? And so I remember thinking to myself, this is a real question you're asking. And so I'd have to get into the conversation about the skin around those joint areas, even on your own body, it's thicker and it's coarser skin. And so yours is darker too. You just can't tell because your skin is
you lack
white.
so much melanin. Right.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, at the time I had, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I know you already know it. At the time I had Jerry curls. Until December of no, you don't know this from your experience, but this is what happened in my freshman year. Until December of my freshman year, I had Jerry curls. So there was that question about what's that stuff you put in your
Jerry curl? No, I did not know that, but Aftergate is the place to make those reveals.
Right. Come on.
I have a funny story about why I cut my hair though.
What you got?
Freshman fall, rushed into my Novel 1 class in Lawrence, and I was like a few minutes late. And if you know about the Jerry curls, you have to have your activator and all that stuff. And so I had done all of that in the morning and rushed off to class, and it was December in Hamilton, New York. So it was a little brisk.
A little brick.
And I sat down in my seat. Maxine was sitting behind me, and I think Holly was in front. And she tapped me on the shoulder in her lovely British accent that I think about all the time because it reminds me so much of her. And she said, "D, your activator has frozen in your hair." And, that's it. I got to cut it.
I'm done.
I went home for Christmas break. It was time.
What will you look at as your accomplishments during that time?
Freshman year or during college in general?
During college in general.
The whole 4-year experience.
The whole 4-year experience. Accomplishments. So actual practical accomplishments. I remember that one of my classmates, Donna, and I.
Yes.
Donna Ann Loffman.
Yes. Loved her from freshman year. Caribbean young lady.
We started the Prism magazine.
Hello.
That was, that was our thing. We started.
Hell yeah.
And I don't know what happened with it, but that was our baby. I remember that very much.
Thank you.
That was
my
meaningful.
editor. I did some time trying
You
to
did? I love that.
keep it alive. My wife did as well.
She did as well. Both of y'all.
I love that. So that was meaningful to me.
Can I ask a little bit like, so what prompted, like, give us a little context of, you can't just say, oh, we started the Prism because we just those nice cat. No, like, come on, let's go into what was behind the need to do that.
So this is where my age is going to start to show, because I don't remember all of the details. I just remember that we had talked for a long time about having some sort of an outlet that was just for and geared towards students of color. And because there wasn't at the time, at the time we had, I think there was another literary magazine on campus that was just, anybody could partake in. There were the two newspapers. There was the Maroon, the Maroon and the Colgate News, and then I guess eventually they merged into one. But there wasn't anything that was sort of just for communities of color. So I remember that's what it came out of, and I remember Donna and I talking about what we wanted to do and how to start it. And I think we got some folks involved from the Scholars Program at the time to help us get it. Some of the adults to help us get it off the ground, but it was ours. Yeah. Somewhere in here I have the first issue.
Oh, awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
That has to be something that's archived at the Cultural Center, like a casing.
I would definitely do that. I'm a pack rat when it comes to sentimental things. So it's
absolutely
in here somewhere for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Or they might have, who knows if Colgate has in their archives, I doubt it, but maybe they might have something
they should, right?
I mean, we know what they should, but
somehow I doubt it. And shout out to OUS and the Scholars Program, because it's funny you say that, because that was our like publishing hub. We would, push it and produce it out of that basement floor over there. And so shout out to all of the Prism editors over the years, people that I know did their part and
the staff writers and the photographers, because I got introduced to photography because at one point I see Al walking around with this crazy camera and I'm like, yo, what are you shooting? It's like, I shoot for the Prism. And I was like, what? And it was like, I remember this is a time when people didn't have cell phones, so you had to have a real camera if you was shooting anything.
That's right.
And I was like, yo, I want to learn about that. And there it is.
That makes me happy. I'm glad to know that happened.
Awesome. Any other accomplishments? Practical, personal?
Other accomplishments. Yeah, like as soon as this podcast is over, I'm gonna think of a bunch and say, darn, why didn't I say that? I remember other things that I don't know would have felt as meaningful to other people, but it was meaningful to me. Like I ended up pledging Phi Tau at the time, like my sophomore year, and at the time, when you pledged one of the fraternities, you had to live in the house the next year, which was just not gonna work for me, because the house, I still occasionally get that smell in my nose of the beer soaked paneling and floors, so that wasn't gonna work. But anyway, the reason I ended up not living in the house, because you had to, that's part of how they, you had dues, and that's part of how the house was able to persist financially, was because I was an RA. And to that point, it had been a really long time, if ever, that there had been a Phi Tau brother who was connected to Res Life. And so it was kind of a big deal, because I think the frat brothers thought that it was going to help them out in some way, which it didn't. But it was important to me to sort of to have that sort of a leadership role on campus, and hopefully, because I had my perspective of fraternities has always been complicated, and I joined one for a very specific reason. What I had wanted fraternities to be, I don't know that they were at Colgate. It was that for me. And so that's part of why it was important for me to do it. It was an important thing for me to be able to maybe show a different side of what the fraternities could be. So I'm grateful for that. That was important to me. I think another accomplishment, like a really personal one, is that I got involved in I developed an exercise routine during my senior year, which was life-changing for me, like seriously life-changing. Changed my life, and I'm eternally grateful for my my roommate from freshman year in college. Shout out to Michael Goff, who was the coxswain for the crew team and captain of the crew team our senior year. And he had been on the crew team since, I think, freshman year or sophomore year. And he talked me into joining, even though I joined the crew team senior year.
Wow.
But here's the thing, I can't swim.
Wow.
And so he said to me, you got to learn how to swim before we get on the water. And I'm like, yeah. Don't worry, I'll figure it out. I had no intention of learning to swim. But I joined the team and really benefited from the workouts. Like, that's what I did, because all of the fall, we were doing these circuit trainings, and we would run the stairs, and we would lift weights in the Nautilus room, and I got the bug. And so that for me was really really life-changing.
So it's funny you say that, because as life has it, people graduate, you don't see them for decades, and then bam, you see a picture of them and you're like, oh, that's what so-and-so looks like. Yeah. I can remember literally seeing the first picture I see of you and like, oh, it's so great to see Darien. Damn, he's buff. Like, yo, I don't remember Darien like what? He's like muscular and shit. Like,
I only had one direction to go in. I weighed 132 pounds at graduation.
That's the Darien I remember.
And I ate like a horse.
Right.
A lot of wings and a lot of pizza.
He's very similar in that he went from skinny to muscle guy. Yes. But I've seen his development, so it didn't shock me. You 20 years later, I'm like, oh shit.
I disappeared, right?
But what's always great is to hear the story behind what was the catalyst, because everyone's got different stories, and mine certainly is nothing like that, which is unique.
What was yours?
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I had major reconstructive knee surgery when I was 26 years old.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I was in a basketball tournament in Atlanta with Alvin, because I was living in Atlanta at the time, and we were in like a rec league, and I blew out 2/3 of my ACL was a wrap, my meniscus was a wrap, and I had to have surgery, and I had to rehabilitate it, and I was still I was 28, and I was like, I'm still competitive. I still want to play ball. We had a flag football season that I QB'd, and it was more than heavy contact. And, and I had a daughter, and I was like, no. Like, this is not. And so, but the doctors were like, you cannot play. You got to stay off your knee, give it a good year or two to heal. Of course, I didn't listen, but it was then after my physical therapy ended, I got into working out, and because I needed to compete. And so I decided to make my body the sport. And I had always been lean, so I knew that I didn't have a weight issue, but it was just the opposite. I wanted to build density. And so I'm at Georgia State. I don't know anybody but Al and a couple of friends that I met through him from Queens.
Yeah.
And I have access to a state-of-the-art gym, and I'm in there 2-3 hours a day doing everything wrong, but I was in there, right? And that was my birth, my rites of passage into fitness.
Yes.
And then I learned and had some older heads school me, and I was like, this is what I'm doing. Like, and I had just was experiencing the personal transfers and all the other non-physical things that people don't understand, like the confidence and the mental health, and you feel
absolutely.
And what people don't know is I was at a very low point in my life when Alvin and Gina gave me a chance to relocate to Atlanta. For me, it was like the Escape from New York movie Reset. And that'll be another show for another day that we'll talk about. That. But the point is that it was that reset that was a major turning point in my life. And so it was a full effort to not only get my mental and emotional state of mind right, but to get me physically right. And
I love
that's
that.
it. Since then, I've profited substantially from providing services to clientele that
Yes.
are serious about what they want to do with their health.
I love that. I think you're on a different level than me, because you are actually training other people.
That's fine. It didn't start. That was never the intention. It just evolved. Life happens a certain way.
Evolved. Absolutely.
And it became that. So yes. And I actually now use that as a way in what I do professionally in the area of youth development and programming, to always incorporate a health and wellness element that also aligns with life skills and academic development. So we got to start giving these kids that guidance earlier on.
Yes.
So by the time they become adults, it's part of their lifestyle, not, you know, you're trying to rewire or undo 27, 28, 30 years of how you've been to then start a new process.
Right.
Yeah. I often wish that I had gotten into exercise earlier, like during freshman year, or even in high school, and it just wasn't a thing for me.
Well, it's part of that era too, because I played Colgate baseball for 4 years, and there was no strength and conditioning coach for the baseball program, right? You know, you had a little off season was your off season. You barely was handling school, and then preseason was some calisthenics, but wasn't much. And so, you know, now every sport has a strength and conditioning coach that works with them in the off season and in the preseason.
Yeah,
so it shows how the market and the industry has evolved in and of itself.
Yeah, very, very different. And that gym, when you go back to campus now, if we had that,
wow, I'm sure they've stepped it up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, come on. If you're a gym head, you're like,
I seriously, when I walked in there for the first time after one of the reunions, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I would pay a ton of money to have a membership at this place.
Right.
That's how I felt at the radio station.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I had a radio show my freshman year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Dope.
A little Sunday jazz show.
No wonder you guys are aligned so much.
Okay, a lot of history shared here.
And now you didn't know that, did you?
No, I did not.
Look at that.
There you go. See.
So on that note, after you've reflected about all your accomplishments, is there anything you look back on and miss?
Yeah. I you know the old saying that youth is wasted on the young. You know, I wish that I had the level of insight and maturity and self-confidence and awareness that I gained as an adult when I was in school. It would have made that such a different experience. We could probably all say that, right? But I definitely miss the simplicity of life. Like even the things that were complicated, you know, now we're looking at it through adult eyes, and it's so much more complicated. And I work on a college campus now, and it's a small enough school that I'm very connected to many of the students of color on campus, and this is stuff that I talk with them about all the time. There is a simplicity to even now, as complicated as life is for, I think, traditionally college age 18 to 21, 22-year-olds, it is infinitely more complicated when you are out in the world doing other stuff. So I miss that. I miss the community that we had. I miss being able to go over to the dining hall and get food whenever I want without having to cook it. And now the dining hall is open 24 hours, and that would be incredible. So I miss simple things like that. I miss, you know, sort of having your whole life sort of ahead of you and not having things laid out just yet. I'm one of those annoying alums. I loved Colgate with all of its complexities and all of the things about it that I wish were different, and there are many. Much of it involves treatment of people of color on the campus back in the day. Still, it was for the best years of my life. For sure.
Dope.
Well, here, we're going to take a pause for the cause, show some love to our sponsor, and then come back and hear about the journey to get you to the college that you're at right now. So this episode is sponsored by Hope Murals. Hope Murals is a nonprofit that provides adolescent youth with an interactive experience of creative expression via an urban arts platform that stimulates both mental and physical development. Please visit their website at www.hopemurals.org to learn more and find ways you can support the work they do. Welcome back. Thank you to our sponsor, Hope Murals. Appreciate all that you're doing. Appreciate your sponsorship. Appreciate your leadership in this world and all you're doing with adolescent youth. Keep it up, please. To all potential sponsors, hit us up. Email us at aftergatepodcast@gmail.com. Definitely would appreciate your support. Before we get into the second part of this conversation, let me show some love to the network, the Defy Life Network. Want to make sure y'all check out the podcast hub. They got defylifepods.com. You can find other dope podcast shows just like this one. And if you also are interested in written content, check them out at www.godefylife.com. Check out the branded apparel at defylifegear.com. While you're on surfing defylifegear.com, make sure you check out Aftergate. Peep the Aftergate t-shirts. Show us some love.
Come on. Let's get them sales up. Let's get the merch up.
And let me pass the mic to Jerry so he can start this second half off.
So we're on with the myth, the man, the legend, Mr. Darien McFadden, Brother Mac, who is personally someone that was extremely relevant in sort of our onboarding to Colgate, and forever grateful. We welcome you back to the show, and we want to take a little pivot here and talk about something that affects all of us, but get your personal professional take on the debate around the mandates surrounding vaccinations and masks for our school systems, whether they be public, private, higher ed, early childcare. We'd love your take on what's happening where you're at, and what do you think should be happening if it's not?
Yeah. So for me personally, there is no debate. Wear a darn mask. Get a vaccination. Like, for me, that feels very, very simple. I struggle with, we have a complex union. The United States is a complicated place. It's challenging, I think, to have a country where you have so many different perspectives and perceptions and schools of thought, and people get their information from different sources, and who to believe, who not to believe. For me, this issue of someone's right to do what they want to do is, sure, people have the right, absolutely, I think, within reason, to do what they want to do, as long as it's not impacting my life or the life of people that I love and care about, who are doing the things that they're supposed to do to try to keep themselves healthy. So for me, it's kind of like drinking and driving, right? It's not my business to tell someone that they can't drink. But if you're going to get behind the wheel of a car and potentially endanger my life or someone else's life who is choosing not to drink and drive, that's a problem. And so for me, it feels like very much the same thing. You definitely have a right to not get vaccinated if you choose not to, or to not wear a mask, but then stay home. and for me, don't endanger others, people who are doing what they're supposed to do. I got my vaccine as soon as I was eligible to get it. I'm considered kind of in non-COVID facing healthcare because of my profession. So when I could get it, I got it. I'm looking for that booster. When it happens, I'm going to get it. I wear a mask. I was remote doing my job at the counseling center at Amherst College remotely for the past year and a half or so, year and 4 months, 5 months, whatever it's been. And we just went back to campus on sort of a hybrid model. So all students have to be vaccinated unless they have a religious or a health-related exemption. And I believe that's the same for all faculty and staff, to the point where, and I respect this, to the point where they recently sent out an email that if you are a staff person on campus who has not been vaccinated by the cutoff date, which I think was September 1st, you have to take a 30-day unpaid leave.
Wow.
And at that point, if I'm not mistaken about this, at that point you then have to prove that you've been vaccinated before you return. And then I think if you haven't proven that after a certain point, then you lose your job. It's considered job abandonment, and you will no longer be an employee.
I think the complexity of the diversity of this country, I think it's overlooked, understated. And I think when people really, if you really think about how difficult to get 300 million people to agree on anything, or even have any type of consensus about anything,
right,
is interesting. But
that's why they refer to it as the democratic experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, gone wrong, perhaps.
I wouldn't say gone wrong, but I would say that it's sort of like in its adolescence. Like, people don't realize how young the evolution. I mean, it depends how far you go back, right? But when you add laws and history and the economy and just all these various factors, and then you try to also involve cultural differences and all, where it should be celebrated, but it's segregated. You realize that there's, I mean, where else in the world where we can look at and say that's an example of how it's working with the same complications that, you know, so we get elements. Oh, that's great healthcare over there, and that's great, you know, government support there, or that's great economy. But you're removing a lot of those variables that you refer to that are complicated. And so,
yes. That's
well said. But I still believe in the experiment, because I think it lends to a growth, a mindset that, as a human race, gives hope that there's potential to evolve to a greater being.
Well, we are in the fire, and I think to myself, you know, all of the people who are dead at this point, right? Who maybe didn't have to die over
Absolutely.
But
you talk about being in the fire, but then, and you're right, we are. But what was the fire like in the 60s?
Speaking of coming through the fire.
Yeah, great segue, my brother.
I love that Chaka Khan song.
So what I'm curious to know is who you are now. But first, tell us who you've been. Give us a sense of that journey. What did you do after you left Colgate, and how did it get you to here?
So I had a sort of a mentor who was the director of the counseling center when we were there. I don't know when he retired. He was, I think, still connected somehow my senior year. He may have stepped down at that point. Lynn Summers, he's long since passed away. I met him originally during my scholar summer. Old white man who was just like, had the heart of a heart of gold. And for whatever reason, sort of took me under his wing. I think he knew that I wanted to go into psychology. And all along the way, he was giving me little tips about what to do in terms of preparing for that. And senior year, when I was looking at applying to grad programs, and I couldn't decide between should I do a PhD or a PsyD or a master's, or, you know, go into social work or what, you know, and he was biased because of his own background as a Ph.D., I believe clinical, but maybe counseling psychologist. He told me, get a Ph.D. and not a PsyD, he said, which was, PsyD is a doctor of psychology as opposed to a doctor of philosophy in whatever field you're in. And at the time, his recommendation was around salary. And he said, you will be better compensated as a doctor of philosophy as opposed to a doctor of psychology. I think that in the end, in current day, that is no longer accurate. I have colleagues that are PsyDs that, we make the same, so it's not an issue there. But I wonder if in my road to where I am, if I would have, I'm also older than lots of the folks that I work with. And at the time that I came up, a PhD was definitely considered more valuable in my particular field than a PsyD seemed to be. So he gave me direction around that. And so I applied to programs that were PhD programs in counseling psychology, and couldn't really decide where I wanted to go. I ended up getting into University of Pittsburgh. They offered me a good scholarship that was renewed for my years there, along with a research assistantship. So I took it and started that August at University of Pittsburgh in the School of Education Counseling Psych program. And it was an interesting time. I was never homesick for home. I was desperately homesick for Colgate when that first year, desperately homesick for it. So that was tough. I went back and forth several times to visit people that first year, but after that first year, I kind of got into it, and finished my coursework over the prescribed time, and shifted to, I was at a point where it was either do my dissertation or do my internship. And against the recommendation of my advisor at the time, I was like, nope, I'm out of here. I want to do my internship. I think I was just academically burnt out at that point. Didn't want to do any more research for a bit. So that's when I moved out to Massachusetts. I applied for an internship at UMass Amherst in the mental health services clinic. And oddly enough, the training director at that time, I learned when I started, had been a Phi Tau from Colgate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he, I think graduated the year I was born. So, but I often wonder, I always say, like, white kids at Colgate and places like Colgate have those connections.
Oh, yes.
With people that I feel like we often don't have as students of color. And I often wonder if I would have gotten this internship if it wasn't for the fact that he saw Colgate on my transcript and on my curriculum vitae. So it worked. Great experience. And from there, that's when I started working at UMass, and not UMass, at Amherst, which was kind of right down the street. All of these schools are located in Amherst, Mass, which is a very small little town. And so UMass Amherst is literally right down the road from Amherst College. And I applied for what was at the time a postdoc training at Amherst College, even though I wasn't postdoc, because at that point I was ABD and hadn't finished my dissertation. And it was supposed to be 1 year, and they kept hiring me back for 3 years until they exhausted the funds for that training program, and then created a job for me, which I was really grateful for, and worked there until 1998. And at that point, I left and wanted to get more experience working in community mental health. College counseling at the time was cushy, to the extent that when I left Amherst, we were seeing 7 to 8% of the campus population at the counseling center. Very cushy. You know,
Yeah.
it wasn't the same as community mental health. And I really wanted to work in a more challenging environment. I wanted to learn more about being able to diagnose appropriately and look at more serious mental illnesses. So I worked in the local hospital on their psych units for a number of years. I worked in community mental health in Springfield, which is a sort of a major city adjacent to Amherst, but desperately longed to get back to college counseling, which really was my first, like, that's what I knew I wanted to do college counseling from the time I left Colgate. And so I had an opportunity to go back. A colleague that had been there when I was a trainee there had become the director. And she's like, you need to come back. And so they had a position. I applied, I got it. And I've been there since. So that's 2006. And I've kind of worked my way up. I was reflecting on this with my, our director right now, who wasn't there when I was there at the time. I'm now the longest standing person at the counseling center. I think the second longest standing person in all of student affairs at Amherst College at this point. The other person is this woman that I revere, who is a dean, a Black woman who is amazing. Shout out to Dean Shari Boykin East, who has been there probably twice as long as I have. But now I'm sort of a senior person on staff, which is odd to me because when I first started working there, I was 26. You know, so yeah, it's been a ride, and I'm grateful for it.
What do you enjoy about your job?
That's an easy one. Mentorship, really. It has, and it's not something that I anticipated or expected, because the field of counseling and clinical psychology are very regimented fields, right? And there's so much, I call it the art of psychotherapy. There's so much about what is supposed to happen within the realm of the psychotherapy session, and what that relationship is like between therapist and client. And there's a rigidity to that as well. Like, you don't overstep certain boundaries, et cetera. And that's just the way I was sort of raised in the field. And those restrictions are in place for a reason. It's about ethics and confidentiality and all that sort of stuff. But what I've come to learn over my time at Amherst, which is a school that is probably has about 1,000 fewer students than we had at Colgate, is that since it's such a small campus, you often serve in other roles for students. And over my time at Amherst, I have found myself in the role of, I think, a bit of a mentor for some students. And it's been literally the joy of my life, really.
Shout out to all those mentors on predominantly white institutions, those mentors of color who are helping other students of color persist, show resilience, and help them get through and ultimately persist and graduate, because it is something that I think is consistent in these conversations as people talk about and reflect. There's somebody, whether it was a student, upperclassman, someone who in faculty, and we can all run off that list of people who helped us at different points of our journey. And so nice to see you are that person for people.
That means a lot to me. I don't know that I would, I'm not what I never enjoyed about any job I worked in is the politics of the place. I'm not talking about national politics, but the politics of these various settings. And that can, we've all been in various workplaces, and there's always that element. I don't enjoy that. I don't have much patience for that. what keeps me where I am is the students, like having an opportunity to help someone to feel confident enough in themselves that when they feel they can't make it to get to graduation, to remind them that they're worthy, that they're there for a reason, is more meaningful than I ever really would have expected. And that's why I stay, for sure. And now I'm finding that I'm even shifting to another aspect of that mentorship. I'm just about to, I'm just shifting in a leadership role on my staff as a training director of diversity, equity, and training. Oh. And so I'm going to be training up and coming clinicians and therapists and psychologists and social workers. And that means everything to me, really. And we have a colleague of mine is a young woman, a young Black woman who just started working with us, who's finishing up her, she just finished up her training and she's getting licensed. And we were just talking the other day, and to be able to say to her, I want you here in this place when I'm retired to represent, and to have an opportunity to maybe help her to believe that she can do that is amazing. Yeah, means a lot.
Powerful, very, very powerful. If you had to use all the wisdom and hindsight that life has afforded you, and had a chance to mentor Darien McFadden at 18, going into Colgate, and then Darien McFadden leaving Colgate and going into the world, what would you tell him?
Well, first I would have said, cut your hair before you start college.
Get a Scully.
Yes, and maybe that the kid and play look doesn't work on anybody but kid and play. So maybe don't do that either junior year. But aside from that, I think I would encourage the younger version of me to don't take yourself so seriously. Right? Relax a little bit. And I wasn't hyper about academics when I was at Colgate. I knew what I was good at, and I focused on the stuff that I really enjoyed and had an end goal in sight. But I felt like I was in everything, like literally every activity or every organization. And relax. You don't need to be in everything. I would definitely have toned that down a bit, and maybe focused on doing some of those things better, as opposed to doing all of it. I think what was the other part of the question was, what would I tell the
21-year-old graduating Colgate about the journey of life that they're about to embark upon? What would be your advice?
That's an easy one as well. Yeah, you will get where you want to go, but the path is not going to look the way you expected it to look. You are not. It's not going to be there. And I actually tell this to students at Amherst all the time. You're not going to have this little straight path. It's not going to happen. Life happens. So prepare yourself and hold on.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
So before we get out of here, we always ask our guests a Colgate question that they had no idea was coming at them. So here's our Colgate question. When you look back, besides your education, name one thing that you would credit Colgate for.
Wow, that is a good question.
That's what we do here.
Besides my education,
besides your degree, give me one thing that when you look at your life, I credit Colgate for this.
I think I credit Colgate for giving me a certain level of self-confidence. And I mean, like in the social realm. I think because I was so involved in so many things, for better or worse, I think I learned to make myself seen in ways that I think helped me as I moved throughout a lot of really white spaces in my life after Colgate. Like, I was the only Black person in my cohort in grad school until 2 years later when another person started. And I was the only Black person in my internship program, and was only the second Black person at the counseling center at Amherst at that point when I first started. So I think Colgate gave me the confidence to sort of put myself in spaces that maybe I hadn't been intended to be in. Yeah.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
Makes sense in my head.
Makes a lot of sense.
That's all that matters is your world.
Yeah.
So share with us how people can connect in your world. Is there anything you want to promote? Any way, anything you want to put out there, any initiative or any hashtag or, contact me here? Is there just anything you want to share, promote? This is a time for us to leverage the ability to connect with each other. So if there's anything you want to share with our listeners. So
I have no social media involvement except I have a Facebook account.
Oh, that counts. That counts.
You both know. Yeah, I'm not on it that much, but I'm on Facebook. If you're a Colgate person and you friend me on Facebook, I will automatically friend you. I'm down with Colgate that way. So
no LinkedIn?
I don't have, no. I started a LinkedIn years ago when it first, and I never filled out a profile. I never did it. So I don't have LinkedIn, no Twitter.
So question for you, with your professional credentials, do you do any independent freelancing counseling that is outside of your university? Practice. Oh, there we go. Hello. Let's talk about it. What do we do in private practice? Come on.
I have a very small private practice that is now remote because of the pandemic. But yeah, I'm only licensed in Massachusetts, so I can only see people in the state of Massachusetts.
Is your spectrum of clientele the same concentration of, let's say, the Colgate? The university age students, or are you spanning services across?
I don't work. I'm not skilled. You can't, in my field, you can't practice something that you haven't been trained in. So I'm not trained in working with kids. The youngest age that I have training in and that I've worked with is in the range of 14 to 16-ish. That's the on the young end, on the youngest end, and all the way up to geriatric for sure. Yeah.
And can you share a little bit about what those services are like for those of us who are who are unknowledgeable about sort of the verbiage and the type of mental health is so broad. So what do you
So it is talk therapy, it's psychotherapy. So I'm not a prescriber, I'm not an MD, I have a doctorate degree in counseling psychology. So the work that I do is primarily biweekly talk therapy with sort of a humanistic and I would say psychodynamic perspective. Throw in a little bit of cognitive behavioral work, and that's primarily what I focus on. Yeah.
How can you be reached for those such services, my brother? Is there a website, a phone number, an email?
Yeah. So the best thing, my email is so I have two emails. My Amherst email is dmcfadden, DMCFADDEN @amherst.edu. amherst.edu. And my real life email is D-1, DEEMINUS, the number 1, at gmail.com. So D was my nickname in college. So, and prior to college, actually. So D-1 at gmail.com. My phone number is, you can find it on Facebook as well, but it's 413-531-0727.
Fantastic.
I do. So I don't have my own stuff to promote, like, aside from that. But I would give a shout out about my niece, who is a psychologist who just published her first book.
Awesome. Yeah, plug it.
And it is, so my niece is Cicely Horsham Brathwaite. HORSHAMBRATHWAITE. Dr. Cicely Horsham Brathwaite. And she's not a Colgate person, but she went to Lehigh, so it's close.
It's almost. She's yours, though. That's good.
She's
enough.
Mine. Yes.
We won't hold that against her, but it's okay.
Don't hold that against her. And she's brilliant. And she just published her first book, which is it is Better Daily Self-Care Habits. Simple changes with lifelong impact. And it's available on Amazon, and I think it's like $13.
Show us some love, listeners. Please show her some love.
She's amazing.
All right. And I'm gonna order a copy myself.
For sure.
So on that note, thank you, my brother.
Thank you.
It has been an honor. And you know what? Class of 91, my KED folk they would clown me if I did not share that you're beloved. Like you are definitely right. Those folk, the people that I'm close with, when we connect, like yo. So have you heard from Darien? How's Darien? Like, so they definitely appreciate it.
I come back for your reunion.
I know. They love you
for that.
Also wanted to mention, because you mentioned both of their you mentioned sister's name, and she's a future guest.
Yes.
And Carla is also a future guest.
Carla Beckford.
Yes.
So
shout out to class of 88.
I'm trying to get folks to come back. So one thing that my class has not done, we do not go back I go back for every reunion, but the rest of the Black folks from my class have not been back really since our 10th or 15th. And I'm trying to get people to come back for this coming reunion, because it's like it's supposed to be a big deal, because it's the first one in 2 years.
Because a big part of this platform is that we know for a fact that Colgate historically doesn't really know the greatness of alumni of color and what they're doing. They don't track it in the same way. And because of the post-Colgate traumatic disorder that we all go through, you have scenarios where many folks from your class and our class and other classes are like, yo, not messing. I ain't for what, And so, and I understand that, because I too have been in that bucket. And this brother right here has, we're like, gee, you got to be a part of it. We're not leveraging all the things that everybody else is, and it's there for us. Let's go get it. And that was enough for me to be like, you know what? He's right. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so, and then in the journey of that, you get to rekindle these kinds of relationships that make it all worth it, because there is that common bond that's lifelong in that regard, because we haven't seen or spoken in a minute, and this picked up like we never stopped.
It's very, very meaningful to me, and I really appreciate you both including me and thinking about me in that way. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our listeners. This has been another episode of Aftergate, powered by the DeFi Life Network. Make sure you check us out on all of those platforms, from Spreaker to Spotify to iTunes. Just give us that love. And good luck to all of our interns who are into their second, third week, who are on campus, right? So give love to Izzy, Kathy, Sophia. Hope all is well in terms of your studies. Keep pushing, and just check out all of the dope episodes to follow. All right.
Yes, sir.
Peace, family.
Awesome.
D, thank you, brother. Be safe.
Thank you. You both are wonderful. I really appreciate you both so much. Thank you for this.
You hear that? Listen closer. That, my friend, is the deafening sound of focus. It drowns out all the useless noise that can clutter the moment. Naysayers don't exist. Haters? Smaters? The peanut gallery? Who's that? When you in your zone, all that noise and all that buzz is just elevator music. So, enjoy your journey, focus on your goal, and bask in the quiet roar that is progress. Because when it's your time to shoot that shot, spit that verse, or close that deal, the only voice that matters is yours. Defy life.